Okay, good evening, colleagues. Welcome to the 38th edition of the Tourism Online Forum series in August 2024. Today, we are very delighted to have you joining us for our evening session. And this seminar is hosted by the Center for Advanced Tourism Research, CATS, at the Hokkaido University. And this is your host, Mo. And for tonight's session, it is indeed an honor to have Dr. Evangelia to share her recent research about festivalization, festival reclamation, and mapping the communicative ecology of festivalscape and tourism in islands. And her research keywords is island communicative ecologies, island festivals, island tourism, festivalization, festival reclamation. And we can also call her Walia Sensei. So Walia Sensei has a PhD in Cardiff, and she is also currently the co-convener for the Small Island Culture Research Initiative. She is executive editor of ePress at Unitag, Auckland, New Zealand. And she is also a chosen research fellow for Japan Foundation 2025. So she will visit Hokkaido University from next January. And she is also a former international research fellow at the Center for Pacific Island Research at Kagoshima University. And her research interests are on the island study and communication for social changes. And she has extensive experiences in the Asian Pacific region, including her previous position as a head of the Communication Arts Department at the DWU in Papua New Guinea and UNESCO Chair Freedom of Expression, PNG, involvements in major research projects and editorial roles with island study journals. And she has published 3 edited volumes on Pacific and PNG communications issues and forthcoming on island culture and festival creative ecosystem book by the UWI Press. And I will share her website later on the chart below. So please note that this online lecture will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel of the Center for Advanced Tourism Research. So now let's invite Walia Sensei to share her lecture, and please leave your valuable comments and questions below in the Q&A box. We also provide our caption in English. If you have difficulty to listen, speak in English, you can also open the caption function. And the floor is yours, Walia Sensei.
Arigato, konnichiwa, or rather konbanwa. It's evening in the South Pacific, 9:30 in the evening, but I did have some coffee earlier on, so I can stay awake and talk to all of you. Thank you, Mo, for inviting me to share my research on islands and island festivals. For the last 6 years, I'm trying to change my screen. Yeah, okay. For the last 6 years, I have been co-convening the Small Island Cultures Research Initiative, as Mo mentioned earlier on, and Dr. Mang Chu, who is our co-host here today, he's also my terrific co-convener. And I think this kind of shows where my passion is. My research is multidisciplinary. It combines all the things that I love, which is islands and communication, and also ethnography. So in this presentation today, I will share with you the framework that I use in my research. And I will start with islandness as a concept, which is very important when you do any research on islands, and explain to you a little bit how I came to develop the island communicative ecology and mapping of communicative ecologies on islands that I have been using for the last 6-7 years. I will also share a few concepts around festivals, festivalscape, festivalization, and festival reclamation. And then I will take you through a case study because I think that it's always a lot easier to understand dense concepts when you apply them in a particular context, and you can see how that works out research-wise in a real setting. And the case study is on Waiheke Island. This is the island I live in, Aotearoa, New Zealand. So what is this islandness? I am from an island. I was born on the island of Crete, and I live on an island in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and I do a lot of research and work on islands. But it took me quite a bit of time to understand that doing research about islands is not necessarily, research that reflects the essence of these islands. Until I entered the island studies kind of space, and I educated myself as an islander how to do research on islands. Now, when it comes to islandness, a lot of people tend to see it as a set of geographical features. So it's a small piece of land surrounded by water, and often, we tend to see it as an isolated, faraway space. But islands are also kind of small scale social groups where cultural, and I also add social interactions, are very densely interconnected. Because of that smaller geographical space, connections and relationships are really a lot more complex. And so on these geographical and social cultural features, I'm also adding an additional element. And so I say that islandness, or I see islandness or islands as a unique context within which communicative performances, and I see festivals, what I'll be talking to you about today, as communicative performances, that they take place in this space, and they produce very distinct island communicative ecologies that fill this space, the island space, with very distinctive meaning, which is really unique to islands. This is very brief presentation on islandness, but I wanted to get you into that mode of thinking about islands and islandness and what it means to do research on them. And I'm sharing with you here a couple of quotes from some of my participants on this island, which indicates this connection with the environment, that, you develop a very unique identity because of the fact that you are just together on a small space surrounded by water. And this other definition here, or it's not a definition, rather, it's a quote from a participant, an island resident, which shows another aspect of islandness and how that influences the island identity, which is that on an island, you're really very close to the natural environment. And so you really know where you are, the place you stand on. Unlike, mainlands, which are places where you cannot easily define. So what is island communicative ecology? How did I come about developing this? I felt, when I started doing more earnestly ethnographic research on islands, that I was needing a more holistic approach to study islands. That islands were actually asking me to see them as a whole, rather than just going into a small island and looking at, let's say, tourism or festivals or media. The island was saying, no, if you're going to study a phenomenon taking place on this piece of land surrounded by water, you need to see it as part of something bigger and a lot more complex. So I started looking at the literature, and I found this. I was working already with this concept of communicative ecology that was developed by Joe Taki and Hearn and some other colleagues. And I liked the elements that they defined it with, the unique context, the identity of the place, the activities that take place on that island, the flows and the channels of information, and a few other elements, which I took on board, and I combined them with another model, the information ecosystems. And this is a model that was developed by Internews. And I thought these two models have really interesting features that I can take and contextualize to islands and use this as a way of mapping island phenomena. And as I was going along, developing, contextualizing, refining this model, which I call now ICE, Island Communicative Ecologies, and also its sister term, RICE, which is Remote Island Communicative Ecologies, I started adding different concepts that would fill and complete my approach. And some of them are, for instance, the storytelling networks or the communicative rhizomes, referring to all these informal communication flows that take place in these very small, surrounded by water, pieces of land and complex concepts as well. But as I was going along, this became sort of my key tool. But depending on what I was studying or what I am studying on an island, I look at also what are the unique features and elements of this phenomenon that I'm studying. And in this particular case, we're talking about festivals. I look at these features and I incorporate them into the communicative ecology mapping process. So it anchors, it grounds, let's say, my approach in a more firm way on what it is that I am studying. So let's look at some of the festival features that are important when you study this. They are public, short, themed celebrations that they are held regularly. Regularity is an important aspect of festivals. Also, often they are traditional events that they are staged. And this is an important concept, staged. They're not always in their authentic original version. They are taken, they are staged, because often they are used to increase the tourism appeal to potential visitors. Often they are used to celebrate community values, ideologies, identity, and also continuity. This is part of that cultural heritage of the community. They also often help to create a sense of belonging and pride. We have this festival, this is our festival, we're showcasing the best of who we are, whether it is food, whether it is culture, music, dance. And that also helps sharing the local resources and spending power on the island in small communities. That's also very important. Another key feature of festivals is that they're highly dependent on the driving forces of key individuals. You will always find some leading figures behind each one of these events that ensure their occurrence and continuity. And one last feature of these festivals is that of course, they enhance their communities' economies. There is money circulating in these events, although not only, but also most importantly is that they really depend on volunteers. You will not find a festival on an island or any community that doesn't rely on volunteers. They are an important component of these events. And here is another also important definition, I would say, of island festivals, or a feature of island festivals. That island festivals are performance events. They're not just any event. They are performative by their nature. They're showcasing something. And in that process of presenting or representing, let's put it that way, they create meaning for the island community and also the visitors. So the islanders, organize this event, and this is how they choose to present themselves to the tourists, to the visitors, whoever comes to attend. This is a little bit of a complex definition of island festivals, but I've chosen to put it in here because Maliocho did really an important research on festival reclamation, which is the core of my presentation today, and I will be explaining that a little bit more later on. But Maliocho did his research on a Mediterranean island, I think it was Sardinia, I can't remember very well right now, and he was looking at this festival that although it was, locally developed and celebrated, at some point it really got out of hand. And he started looking at island festivals as spaces where a lot of power dynamics, take place, and also where performances of identity that characterize cultural contact and conflict on islands are played out. So a little bit complex, but keep in mind, or that he's trying to say that festivals are not actually as simple events as they might sound. Come and have a good time. There is quite a lot, and there is politics behind it often, especially in smaller communities. I think that, the literature in Ireland, in festivals in general, would tell you that there's a lot of benefits in the hosting communities. They showcase what every community has that they are proud of or they want to promote. And that can be anything from traditions to art objects to public celebrations. Also, a key aspect, benefit, let's say, of festivals is that the island culture becomes a driver of development, led by the growth of the creative economy. And it's important here to note that festivals fall within the domain of the creative economy. And of course, there is many benefits, but also there are often tensions and constraints and sort of conflicts. And that happens often when festivals become tools in tourism and economic development, or in-place marketing and the selling of attractions and venues. And this little quote here from one of my participants illustrates really well these tensions that can be created as a result of tourism becoming a driver for the festivals. So he says, I love Waiheke. This is the island that I live. But the problem is that it has become known as the island of wine and dance parties. I wish it was something else. And because this is how, Waiheke is promoted to the mainland. A lot of people come over Christmas for their office parties. And, because there's a lot of vineyards, people come, they go to a vineyard, they have their office party. And this local here, he says, there is more to us than just that. Yeah. So all of these help us sort of develop an understanding of what is the island festivalscape. And here is a definition, kind of a simple definition to it, which is a combination of tangible factors, the actual performance itself, and the intangible atmosphere associated with the festival, which informs how people relate to the festival. So, you go to a festival because you might want to listen to the band playing the music in that music jazz festival, but also there is something else. And islands are often associated with this intangible atmosphere. The island itself, its own identity. So you don't only go to that festival, but also you go because there is something in the island that makes the event unique and different. There are various dimensions in these festivalscapes. And also what is important to look at is that often visitors to festivals in islands, they tend to be attached to the cultural aspect, to the cultural community that is associated with the festival. So in other words, you don't go just to the festival, but you're also going to the community that hosts it. And if that community, if that island has a very unique cultural, social makeup, identity, that becomes an important factor in revisiting this island. Also, another aspect with festivals is that you don't go on your own. Well, most often. You go with friends, you go with family, or you go there and you interact with other people. So there's this social relationships and shared experiences that make festivals what they are. And also, when you go to a festival, there is that perceived island destination image, yeah, which is like a very strong factor. Like, you know, the Satuchi art islands, Satuchi Sea islands, you go not only for the art, and you have already a certain perceived image of that, but also for the whole journey of, you know, traveling to the islands and what perception you have of those islands. And this little quote at the bottom here shows that, for instance, when you come to Waiheke Festival, the perceived destination image is, to those who come, that the Waiheke festivals have a very strong zero waste, very environmental aware kind of activities. So there is that additional element to it that makes them unique. But let's go into my island. Let me introduce you to Waiheke Island. This is how it looks. And you can see here on the map, this is Aotearoa, New Zealand, the South and the North Island. We are right in the north part of the North Island, and we are right in the Hauraki Gulf. You can see the mainland surrounding the island. It's just 40 minutes. It's 40 minutes on the ferry. This is where the ferry arrives. You can see the ferry arrival pier here. And this is where I live. I don't know if you can see my little arrow, but this is where my home is. I'm a very lucky person. I have 3 beaches to choose from in summer. So as soon as you arrive into the island, you have this little welcoming message which says, slow down, you are here. And this is kind of capturing that element of the island which says you don't have to rush anymore. It's a small place, just relax, you know, don't rush around. But Waiheke Island is really a very unique place. It's very known for its alternative lifestyle. It's a kind of a hotbed of political activism. We have rapid gentrification, which means that the island is now a very popular place for the rich to come and buy these very nice big houses, which makes it very difficult for us to afford to buy a house on the island. Also, it's been seen in the last few years a very rapidly expanding tourist industry because of its wine industry and art. Also festivals, which makes it really difficult to find a house to stay because we have a lot of Airbnbs. It's a classic example of, you know, an island becoming very popular with tourists. And so, you know, this little quote here from a participant is giving you a really nice insight into how Waihekeans, the people who live on Waiheke Island, feel. He says, I have an identity as an islander because I know that we will not take shit. It shows kind of that kind of tough activist kind of character. I know that we will stand our ground and fight on anything that is fair. And also that we have a very strong environmental values, and that it's the artiest place. It is a highly creative place. There is hundreds of artists living on this island and a lot of activists as well. Now, a population of about 9,000 people has been able to produce all these festivals that you see here. And this is the first layer of our mapping process. So when you do mapping of the communicative ecology of the festivals on an island, you come first with that first layer, which is descriptive and tries to identify how many categories of something exist. And it was really amazing to see that there was all these festivals, and we really haven't covered them all. These are just some examples. You can see how many community festivals, for instance, are there. Seasonal festivals. We have also a lot of sustainability related festivals. We have a lot of arts festivals, a big bulk of them, music, dance, and also food and wine, because as I say, the island has vineyards and has olive trees, and people come to do just that. So this is kind of, as I said, the first level of our mapping. What do we have here? And a first attempt in start looking at what is emerging thematically wise and what does that tell us about the island through its festivals. This is the second level. So once you've done that first level of mapping, you start looking, you start digging deeper, and you start looking at more qualitative elements. And so that took us into grouping these festivals, these island festivals, around these four rough categories. The first one is festivals that they are island focused, where the participants are the community members, the island residents. And this is showing an example of Junk to Funk festival, which is essentially looking at your rubbish and looking at the rubbish station on the island and producing fashion. And then there is a big event where, you know, the community comes and celebrates creativity, resourcefulness, and, you know, involving different generations. So we have these island-focused, community-focused events. And then we have these other festivals that they were initiated on the island, but they have become now Auckland region urban all kind of events. So the jazz festival started on the island as a way of boosting the income to small restaurants and pubs in a period which is coming after the summer season, which is our autumn here around April. But then all of a sudden, this event became very appealing to people from Auckland. They would say, okay, it's a 40 minutes ferry ride. We are going to go to Waiheke and have good time listening to jazz. So this is an example of something that started locally and it became a regional sort of now well-established event. And then we have those festivals that, although they were initiated on the island, they have now become international. And this is going to be the little case study I'll present to you in a minute. And then we have this last category, which only started appearing as a result of these island festivals that have been internationalized. And these are the island reclaimed festivals. They are either festivals that they were taken back into the community by the community because they felt it was kind of, taken away from them, or festivals, new festivals, to act in kind of opposition or making a statement to these events that they are no longer representing the community. So when we look at island festivals and the benefits and applying them in the research that we did, this is then produced another layer in the mapping process of these festivals. So we started looking at festivals with different lenses. The first one, for instance, like the jazz festival I mentioned, it's an image maker and a destination branding. So now for Auckland, the jazz festival is acting as a destination branding for Waiheke Island. It's something you do in autumn when, we're all, done with summer and we're looking for something to do. And here it is, you go to Waiheke for that. Another benefit is that festivals can help diversify the tourist product. And that obviously has an impact or a benefit on the island economic development. Some festivals are for community building. And I'm referring here, for instance, to the Garden Festival, the Waiheke Garden Festival, which started as a fundraiser for a family whose child was very sick. They didn't have the financial means. And the community came together. They opened their gardens as a one-off festival to fundraise. It was very successful. And so it continued. And now it is a very well-established, festival on the island. Another benefit is that, benefit, but also perhaps not a benefit, depending on how you see it, that a festival can transform the island landscape. Like, for instance, the sculpture on the Gulf Festival here on Waiheke that completely transforms the natural actual space, the landscape of the island for several weeks. Another benefit is that it can provide a model for sustainable environment. And a lot of the festivals on Waiheke Island are either sustainable environment driven, or that they have practices within the festival that they're friendly to the environment. And I know in Japan, I've been to festivals in Japan, they're fantastic with rubbish sorting, but it's not the case with all countries, trust me. So for that to happen here on the island in New Zealand is quite unique. And of course, the last kind of benefit an island can have, a festival can have, is retaining the island heritage. So just on a glance, when we are looking at, when we finish the mapping of the festivals on the island, we started looking at it, sort of dug deeper, and we started looking at even more qualitative elements of this research. And what came up wasn't anymore about the festivals, but it was really about the community. A community that highlights that human capital, and the social capital, but in particular human capital, the ability of the islanders to explore and try and do things. Also, what we found out is that the more local a festival is, the more sustainable it is. The bigger it becomes in terms of audience and outsiders and tourists, the sustainability element becomes quite problematic. Also, big festivals are not sustainable by nature, unless they really try very hard. And they often, they are not successful in tapping into local resourcefulness. And as I said earlier on, volunteerism is very, very high. It was very high in all festivals across the island. So this is just before I get into the case study of island reclamation, just a quick glance at the community festival. This is an image of the fossil fuel free fiesta festival, which is very much a community rooted festival, sustainability, and again, really tapping into that community spirit and social cohesion that exists on the island. And also, some of these quotes here that I've chosen just highlight that community spirit, and also that these are festivals that the locals don't need to spend money necessarily to participate. It's there for the community. So we look at this, which is local, sustainable, sort of innovative, to what I mentioned, the Jazz Festival, which is now something where the island becomes a host, but also the island benefits, because when the visitors come from Auckland to go to the jazz festivals, the venues are the vineyards, there are pubs, there are cafes and restaurants, and they really boost the economy of the island at a season where things are quite slow. If I have the time, I'll show you a little bit of a video at the end. So we have that. So from the community, we're going into this kind of local going urban and regional that still serves the island communities, to something much bigger, to what I mentioned earlier on, the sculpture on the Gulf event, which is organized by the Waiheke Community Art Gallery. So it started as something that was very much engaging the entire island. Local artists were also invited, but it was, a curated open air space with monumental big pieces of sculpture exhibited, inviting also international artists to exhibit. Now, this is now one of the top 50 international open air sculpture, festivals, exhibitions internationally. So it's become really very famous. And to give you an understanding of what's happening with this festival is you arrive by ferry on the island, and there is a bus waiting for you to take you all the way up around the hill at the beginning of the trail. And a bus can equally wait for you to take you back to the ferry. Now, that's now a problem here, because what we have is people coming in just for that, and they're not really going to the rest of the island. They are not going to the village to spend some money in a restaurant or cafe. And, people who complained said that, those who benefit are the tourist operators and the ferry, which is a private company, unfortunately, here on the island. So this became for us a really very good example of festivalization, the concept of festivalization. I'll explain to you in a second what that is. And also it became a trigger to festival reclamation, because the locals felt that they really needed to come up with an alternative. And the alternative was the Sculp Aotearoa. And this was a smaller open air sculpture event that was hosted within the village. And it was entirely organized by the local artists. And so there was that sense of ownership. Yeah. So we have these two events, and one was created as a result of the other, as a response to something that started on the island, and then it became something that the locals felt no longer belonged to the island. In this year, the sculpture on the Gulf was curated. It had international artists. Only one local island artist was invited. And this is an island that has hundreds of artists, very well known as well. And when I went around asking the island residents and the artists what they thought of it, they said that this event is just so highbrow now that is really completely disconnected from the island. So you can see the big scale of sculptures here that are exhibited on this island. So I mentioned festivalization. I promised to talk to you about festivalization on the title of my presentation. So what is festivalization? It's the over-commodification or perhaps commercialization of a festival that is exploited by tourism and place marketers. And that is very much linked to, linking to festivals as sites of presentation and representation, rather. And it brings in the politics of representation. And that is a combination of how the islanders present themselves, or they want to present themselves and their island and their art, and also a representation rather, by others and for others. So there is a difference between presenting who you are as a local community, and represented by a tourist authority, a place marketer, as I said earlier on, and for others, not only for your community, but for the visitors, the tourists, whether they are regional or international. And this quote here is kind of illustrating really well this issue of festivalization. This local person said that this festival used to be something that the locals had a lot more access to, and now it has become a major art event, which is fine, but its connection to the community is more removed And the ones who benefit from it are basically the tourist operators rather than the wider community. So as a result of festivalization, in communities, we have this festival reclamation phenomenon. And reclamation, the reclamation of a separate festival as a unique local celebration after a larger festival has become a tourist attraction. So you want to bring the tourists because they are vital for a small island economy. But when that festival becomes just a tourist attraction, then it loses its connection to the local community. And that's when the community comes back and says, we are going to take back this festival or create another one that really responds better to our needs. And this is what Malhocho says, and I adapted it from him, is that when an island festival no longer performs an identity narrative or like story to which the islanders can accept, the island community then may choose to transform the festival through new activities or redesign new ones separate to the festival to perform the identity with which the community identifies. And this is what exactly happened with the counter festival the artists here on the island created. And these are a couple of quotes there. Oh, sorry, excuse me. They say is that, even if the art in the smaller festival doesn't sell, it doesn't really matter because it's just a recognition of, our community and who we are. And they are not objecting to others coming and seeing, but they want to be seen as the hosts of the event. I know this is a little bit of a longer quote, but I feel it's important because it makes references to Japan. And Friedman here is asking a really pertinent question. The key to understanding different reactions to tourism in regards to festivals is the question of who is producing what for whom. And he says here very characteristically that when producers are in charge of their own representation, so when islanders are in charge of their own representation, as in the case of the Ainu in Japan, in Hokkaido, where most of you perhaps tonight are sitting, the development of the tourist industry can go hand in hand with the maintenance of a very distinct cultural identity and the emergence of a political consciousness, the indigenous identity that you very well know. So instead, when tourism exploits, displaces, and instrumentalizes its object, resistance to tourism and the creation to a contrasting selfhood is the likely result. Anyway, it's a bit of a quote, but I'm very happy to share my my notes. So what happens then now in post-COVID times? Because during COVID, all these festivals really ceased to exist. A lot of these festivals came back. Some of them stopped. Some of them reinvented themselves. And also what we have is another manifestation of what I just talked to you about on festival reclamation. We had a very big sculpture in the Gulf event again this year. It happens every 2 years. Thousands of visitors came to visit, but the island felt that it wasn't involved. The island artists felt excluded. So what did they do? That festival reclamation. They developed this new festival. They call it Putanoa, where everything and everywhere Arts Festival Waiheke. So we are going to see 650 creative people involved in 66 different art disciplines, for painters to poets, to sculptors, to designers, displaying their work across the island. And this is the concept, that there is no limitation to where the art is going to be presented on the island, like this big international conference, which has a defined trail that you have to be taken to and follow the trail, and then off you are bussed back to the ferry. This is a wonderful concept of reclamation, where the local artists say, you know what, the entire island is going to be open to everyone to celebrate, our creativity. So this is kind of a positive twist to the post-COVID and also the island creative scene coming back in. So I'll try to wrap up my presentation here, because I know it's late, very late for me, perhaps not so much for you. For those of you interested in my research and also Mo's research, our new book is coming up on island cultures and festivals, an entire book on the topic that I have coordinated with my colleague at the University of West Indies in Jamaica. And we have a chapter on this presentation, and also there is a chapter there from Mo Sensei on Japanese islands, Japanese art island festivals, which I think is going to be more interesting to you. And I will pause here. Arigato gozaimasu. Thank you very much for being patient and listen to my presentation so late in the day. I would like to draw your attention to our network and also to our new initiative, New Voices in Island Studies. We're inviting people who are just now start engaging in islands research to join. We have a number of events around it. And also we'll be very happy to announce our next big event conference next year in June on the island of Jersey in the UK. And we're going to have a very specific panel just for the new voices in island studies. So if you have something interesting to share with us, please do. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Valia Sensei, for your wonderful work. I think the time is just perfect. We can have around 20 minutes Q&A. Normally, people prepare their questions slowly, so I will ask something first. I hope, because our research is quite close to each other, but also quite different after listening to your presentation. As you mentioned, the gentrification, especially people from tourism study, are really concerned this issue. May I ask the first question, where is the local control of this process, and can they really do something better than they currently do on Waiheke Island?
The islanders are very aware. The gentrification process has made the island very expensive to live on. And this was an island where people with average income used to live very happily. It has become now a neighborhood of Auckland. You know, you can commute to Auckland for work because people like the lifestyle. We have, during tourist season, the big cruise ships arrive in New Zealand. They arrive on the island and it's like you are invaded. You know, at the end of the day, the whole island feels exhausted with all these people coming in. Unfortunately, with gentrification, it means properties are higher. During summer, locals cannot find a place to stay to rent, and not even people in hospitality. We have people actually living in cars, living in, very, cheap, basic accommodation. Now, the island has tried to solve the problem. They have approached the Auckland Council because we are part of the Auckland Council. But there hasn't really been a resolution yet, unfortunately. What we see is a very difficult situation where the island needs the income. The businesses on the island need the visitors. But at the same time, you can't stop people coming.
Yeah, that's a very difficult issue to manage. We have a question from not Q&A, but direct question. So when festivals become a way of developing tourism, and as it grows in influence, not only will it appear that those who benefit from tourism may not be the people who live there, but there is a risk of over-tourism. And so how do you think we can balance the development of a tourism economy with community development?
Well,
Very
right.
tough question.
If we had the answer to that question, we would not be needing to do all this, right? I think um, it's a big issue. It's interesting though, because in Japan you have the opposite. You have the
Mm,
over tourism in big urban areas, and the Japanese government is really trying to push people to go to the smaller
right.
islands or smaller places. Here on Waiheke, we have the opposite problem. And that is basically because we're very close to a major urban area. It makes it a lot easier to come. I think perhaps a personal response to this, which is very difficult to impose it on whole islands, is that how much development do you want
Mm,
to have on the island or your community?
mm,
How much how do you define that? How do you define um, development for your community? What would be enough, and how do you stop when it gets too much?
mm,
Here on the island, uh, there is one way. There is one ferry coming once every hour, and
mm,
it can only take a certain number of people. How many people can get on the ferry?
mm,
Right? So automatically that kind of stops certain people coming. But nevertheless, it's still a lot more. We're talking about an island of 9,000 people, and during summer it goes 30, 40,000. Yeah. So
right.
no, I'm sorry that I do not
Mm,
have an answer to your question. It's, I think,
yeah.
a lot of authorities would like to have an answer to that.
Yes. Oh no.
And
Oh.
I think
Mm,
it's not down to individual communities. This is
mm,
something that has to be systematically addressed by
mm.
governments for those communities that experience this.
Right. I think all the researchers and scholars around the globe all try to find a better solution and suggestion for this question. But it's a great topic. We all keep in mind how to solve this issue.
Yeah.
Even we solve the issue now, we probably will continue to solve this issue for tomorrow. There's something new will come.
I think
Mm,
because every place is unique, is different. So the solutions to, Waiheke Island, which is an urban sort of
mm,
close to an urban area island, is very different to a Japanese island.
mm,
We went together to the Naoshima to the Satuichi Art Islands. These are depopulated islands.
mm. Yeah, but
Even if you bring a
context.
lot of tourists, there will not be enough locals to cater for them.
Mm,
And here on this island, we have lots of locals, but sometimes they can't afford to rent a house because of the gentrification process.
wow.
So here is an example
Mm,
of how you can regulate the market, at least here in this particular context. In winter, we have
mm.
300 houses empty.
300. Mm,
Empty houses when there is not enough houses to go for the locals to stay. Why do we have 300 empty houses in winter? That's because the owners prefer to rent them just only in summer as Airbnbs because they make enough money and they don't care renting them throughout the year. But there is a regulation here in New Zealand which says you can rent something in summer, but if you rent it in winter, the house has to have higher standards for
mm,
living.
I see.
So the owner say, I don't want to spend that much money
Mm,
to prepare my property so that it can be rented in winter. So here we are talking about regulations that can be
mm.
changed to free up accommodation, make it more affordable as well.
Right. Okay, before we receive another question, I want to ask another question because I saw some of your slides mention about the Maori people. And apparently Hokkaido shares similar problem with Ainu people, especially in the modern contemporary art exhibition. How much of those component elements can cover indigenous culture, probably the First Nation people and their artists and their culture? Can you provide more detail about this part?
Yes, Maori are the indigenous people, the tangata whenua of Aotearoa, and here on the island, there is a strong presence of Maori artists.
Mm,
They are part of the community, and in fact, they have a strong say on what this island is about, creatively wise, from an indigenous lens.
mm,
So a lot of the local art is representing indigenous artists. And they are just seen as part of the creative community of the island. But they are
mm,
considered to be the hosts rather than just anyone else.
mm,
I think that there is a difference in how Maori are perceived as indigenous people in Aotearoa and how Ainu. You know, it's a recent recognition of indigeneity in Japan. I don't know much yet about it, but here in Aotearoa, Maori artists have a very strong position in
mm.
how they represent their art and their identity, Maori identity.
Right, thank you. I think some students just joining, and I know we have some people research phenomenology. Since some part of your presentation mentioned about island phenomenology, maybe they have some interest about this topic. Could you, if you can you introduce a little bit more about that part? Or if not, it's also okay if this could be.
Well, yeah, I was actually
Mm,
referring to studying island
mm,
phenomena, right? And you can and phenomenology is a whole distinctive
mm,
lens of inquiry, which is closer to anthropology and ethnography.
mm. Okay.
And also
Mm,
phenomenology is very much um, you know um,
mm,
um, especially for islands, is looking at these island phenomena from a holistic a point of view.
mm.
Yeah.
Right. I think we are right on time, and now is a perfect 90 minutes. And thank you very much, Walia Sensei, for your wonderful lecture. Okay, I think I will stop the recording from now, and thank you everybody for joining tonight's session. And we are really looking forward to meet you in person as the next January in Hokkaido University in person.
I'm looking forward to seeing you all there next January.
Okay,
Thank you
thank
very much for
you.
listening.